Hi, I'm Robert O'Brien from O'Brien Guitars, and this is the new LMI binding machine. Now, I've been using versions of the LMI binding machine for many years on my own personal guitars and with students. And I knew if they came out with a new version, it had to be good. Here's some of the new features. The first thing you'll notice is it's a much more compact design than previous versions. It's made to be screwed to your bench permanently, or you can attach it to a piece of plywood, which can then be clamped to the side of your bench and easily removed and stored. It also has a revolutionary micro-adjust indexed rub collar for precise binding channel cutting depth of adjustment. Now, previous versions also had this. However, the footprint was a little larger than this one. On the newer version, the footprint's a little smaller. Now, why is that important? Well, if you have a pronounced radius on your back or an extreme taper from the butt to the neck, you want this thing riding right on the edge of the instrument so you have uniform cutting depth of your binding channel. Now, this feature alone should put this thing on the Nobel Prize list. Here's how it works. If your cutter head is coming through here, you have your router mounted on top, and you want to expose more or less of the bit. In other words, you want a deeper or shallower cut, then you just release the block mechanism here and unscrew or screw up the rub collar, therefore exposing less or more of the bit. That's genius because all of your mechanisms on your routers that mount on top here are never precise. You never have a micro adjust. This adjusts in 0.003 of an inch increments. The robust aluminum router mount assembly is pre-drilled for the Makita, Bosch Colt, or rigid laminate trimmers. It has a super smooth, stable linear bearing system with 8-ball bearings and 4 bearing assemblies. It also supports 4¼ inches of vertical travel, unlike the previous version, which was only 3½. In addition to the super smooth linear bearing system, it also has a counterbalance constant force spring, which minimizes rub collar marks on very soft woods like redwoods and cedars. The new LMI binding machine is also made in-house right here in the US of A at LMI for complete control of product quality. When you receive the LMI binding machine, you'll need to, of course, mount your router to the robust aluminum base assembly. Now, this is pre-drilled for the Makita 1¼ horsepower RT0701C or the Bosch Colt 1 horsepower PR20 EVS, which is what I will be using for the purposes of this video, as well as the rigid R2401. I'm going to start by removing the aluminum base from the router. Then I'm going to remove the plastic base from the aluminum base. Next, attach your router base to the binding machine router plate using the 4 supplied screws and washers. If you need to, refer to the last page of the instructions that come with the jig for the base plate attachment screw location. The binding machine base can now be screwed to your bench permanently using the pre-drilled holes in the base, or in my case, I'm going to attach it to a piece of plywood. And that way I can just clamp it to my bench. That way it's removable and can be put away for easy storage. Now, if you use this mounting method for the binding machine, make sure that your work board that you mount it to is small enough to allow access to your guitar once it's in the binding machine carrier. Now that the laminate trimmer base is mounted to the binding machine and the binding machine is mounted to a piece of plywood that can be clamped to the end of my bench, I'm now ready to insert the LMI binding cutter into the laminate trimmer. I like to make sure that it's at least 3/4 of the way in. You don't want any surprises while you're cutting your binding channels. Technical term for that is bad. Also make sure that you securely tighten the collet. You can now insert the laminate trimmer back into the base. Next, choose the appropriate bearing that will give you the width of cut for your binding and purfling scheme and install that onto the cutter head. Don't forget to install the screw. And when I do that, it's just kind of snug, a little bit past finger tight. Before using the LMI binding machine, you want to do a test cut. And I either use my buddy's guitar for that or a piece of scrap wood. Take a cut off from your binding or purfling schemes, and you can eyeball it. If you need to macro adjust it, use the actual adjustment on your router. Once you get it close, you can micro adjust it by releasing the mechanism here and then opening or closing the rub collar there up and down the threaded part until you get the exact depth you need. What I like to see is just a skosh proud but flush on the side. With the router set up the correct depth, I've got the correct bearing on there to give me the correct width of cut. I like to do a test cut on a piece of MDF. Also, don't forget to use personal protection equipment as you're working. Here's my test channel. Here's my test piece of binding. I place it in there. I'm just a microscope proud. I want to have a little bit of fun scraping the bindings, and I'm flush on the side. So now we're set up and ready to do this on an actual guitar. During your testing, if you found that you weren't set up, then come down here, release the stop, and then screw that rub collar up or down to expose more or less of the bit, and then retest. With the LMI binding jig set up, ready to go, clamped to the side of the bench, we're now ready to turn our attention to the body. Now to hold the body, I'm going to use the LMI carrier. This obviously is sold separately from the binding machine. It has adjustable arms and stanchions that will allow you to level the guitar. So what I do is I start by just placing the guitar. The side that I want to cut goes down on the bench. I then take the guitar carrier, the shorter arms go in the upper mount. So this gets placed over the guitar like so, making sure that the arms are resting on the body. I then take this elastic cord that comes with it, place it around the arms here, and then pull that up tight. What that's going to do is hold everything in place till I can get back with my screwdriver. And I start by tightening the screws from the arms working in. And it's just finger tight, you don't have to kill it. I then remove the elastic cord and very carefully turn the guitar body over on the bench. The next thing I do is level it. To level, I just take a ruler, place it directly on the bench and measure up to the top. I'm coming in at exactly 6 inches or about 150 millimeters. I do that on both ends. Down here, I'm coming in at 6 1/4 or about 156 millimeters. So either I drop this in or raise the other end. Since I'm already down this end, why don't we just drop it? To lower it, just loosen the set screw and then adjust the threaded screw here, and the guitar will drop, then tighten it back up. Obviously you want to do that on both of these down at this end. And then once again, take your measurement, make sure you're the same height off the table on both ends. Once you're satisfied that your guitar is indeed level, then just go ahead and tighten the brass set screws, lock everything in place. Now before I start cutting the binding channels here, let me talk a little bit about the direction of the router. In the past, I used to start at the widest bout, travel downhill this way, pop out, come in here, travel downhill, downhill to the middle, pop out, spin the guitar around, and do that again on this side. However, these days, I'm starting here and just going around clockwise, and I've never had a problem. You're doing a climb cut. In other words, you're going with the rotation of the bit, the entire cut, rather than just 50% of the time. I've never had a problem with that, and I think perhaps that idea of coming in here at the widest point and traveling downhill and driving downhill and popping out and continuing, I think that perhaps needs to go to the Luthier Mythbusters, because I think it's not necessary. I just do it clockwise. But you can do whatever you want.